Black woman CEO's seat stolen by white passenger moments. Later, karma delays the takeoff. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get up or get out. The cabin was still, until his voice cut through it like metal scraping glass. Get up or get out. Every head turned. Row 2. A woman in a tailored yellow suit, spine straight, eyes calm. Across from her, a red-faced man jabbed a finger toward the seat. You heard me. That's my spot. The flight hadn't even closed its doors. The air smelled of recycled citrus and quiet tension. A pilot stepped out from the cockpit, adjusting his epaulets, trying to sound professional but failing to hide irritation. Ma'am, there seems to be a mix-up. Please stand up so we can resolve this. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even set down the magazine in her lap. In seat 2C, a young woman froze mid-scroll on her phone. A man 2 rows back whispered, "What's happening?" Another began recording. The man towering over her raised his voice. You people always pull this stunt sneaking into first class with fake tickets. That word "you people" cracked the silence wider. The pilot sighed, gesturing to the aisle. Ma'am, let's not make this difficult. Her voice came low, level. I'm not making it difficult. I'm sitting in the seat I paid for. The man scoffed. Paid for? Not dressed like that, you didn't? He turned toward the flight crew. Why is she even still here? The attendant hesitated. Sir, we're verifying now. She tapped her tablet, scrolling, then frowned. That seat shows as reassigned. See? The man said, smirking. Told you. She doesn't belong here. It was wrong in their will down pause, in rabuses. Her jaw tightened once, no anger, just precision. She reached into her blazer, handed over the printed boarding pass. The attendant snatched it, scanning. The screen blinked, error. I'll need you to step aside, the pilot said again, now firm. If you refuse, we'll have to deboard you. She met his eyes. Then deboard the right person. No one breathed. In that second, the hum of the engines dimmed, and the sound of a single paper tear echoed as the man ripped her boarding pass clean in half. That's fake, he muttered. You're banned from flying. A gasp rolled through the cabin. She didn't flinch. Just placed the torn paper carefully on the armrest, looked up at him and said, Be careful what you ground, Captain. Some things were meant to rise. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to Dr. Naomi Ellis, the woman who didn't just buy a ticket, she built the airline. The pilot stood stiff, hands clasped behind his back, waiting for her to yield. She didn't. Outside, the last luggage cart rolled away, sunlight flashing off the window like a warning. Inside, row 2A was still a battlefield disguised as luxury. Dr. Naomi Ellis sat perfectly still. The yellow of her suit caught every flicker of cabin light, calm yet defiant. Around her, whispers rippled, passengers craning necks, pretending not to stare. To them, she was just a woman who refused to move. To herself, she was something else entirely. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to see. 42 years old, founder and CEO of Horizon Air Group, the same airline whose logo gleamed on the headrests. But today, she wasn't flying as an executive. No security team, no badge, no first-name greetings from crew. She'd booked the ticket under an alias. She wanted to know how her company treated strangers. Now she did. The attendant leaned in, voice thin and forced. Ma'am, we need you to step aside so we can verify. Naomi looked up. Verify what? Your seat assignment. Then check the manifest, she said evenly. You'll find the name Naomi Clark, that's me. The attendant hesitated, then turned the tablet slightly away, scrolling fast, eyes darting. It's not appearing. Of course it wasn't. Naomi had seen this game before, subtle erasure wrapped in protocol. At 27, she'd once been told her card didn't go through at a business lounge she owned 20% of. At 33, she was mistaken for her own assistant. And now, at 42, It was still the same sentence, dressed in new uniforms. A man in row 3 muttered, "She should just move." Another replied, "Yeah, why make trouble?" Trouble. That word again, the one used when power feels embarrassed. Naomi's gaze shifted toward the pilot. "Tell me, Captain," she said softly, "do you often make assumptions before takeoff?" He frowned. "Ma'am, this isn't about assumptions. It's about procedure." She smiled faintly. "Procedure doesn't tear paper." He blinked, unsure what to say. The man beside him, Mr. Walker, the one who'd claimed her seat, folded his arms like a victor. "You people always think the rules don't apply." Naomi didn't answer. She looked past him, through the small oval window. A cloud drifted by soft, unbothered. Then she said, quietly but clearly, "I wrote the rules." The attendant froze. "Excuse me?" Naomi leaned back. "Don't worry. You'll understand soon." The pilot turned away, muttering something into his radio. Naomi reached for her phone, thumb hovering over a single contact labeled Rachel Horizon HQ. She didn't press call. Not yet. She wanted to give them one more chance to do the right thing. But the right thing never came. The overhead lights flickered as the engine spooled. Boarding nearly complete, a sense of finality filled the air except for her row, where Justice had yet to board. Naomi closed her eyes. Calm. Silent. The yellow suit glowed like defiance wrapped in sunlight. Somewhere deep down, she could already feel it, the shift before the storm. Next, the storm would arrive, wearing a name tag and a nervous smile. The doors sealed with a hiss. Cabin pressure tightened, the engines hummed low, and tension took the last open seat. The pilot had returned to the cockpit, but his shadow still lingered thick in the aisle, heavy in the air. Mr. Walker sat beside Naomi now, pretending to scroll his phone, a smug smirk flickering every few seconds. Across the aisle, a blonde flight attendant named Cheryl whispered into her earpiece, eyes flicking toward Naomi, then away. The whole crew moved around her like she was radioactive. "Sir, would you like a pre-flight drink?" Cheryl asked, all sugar. "To make up for the inconvenience." Mr. Walker grinned. "Scotch, neat. Maybe she can take mine back to economy." A few passengers laughed nervously, the kind of laughter people use when they want to pretend injustice is just a misunderstanding. Naomi didn't look at him, didn't speak. She simply folded the torn boarding pass and slipped it into her coat pocket, like a piece of evidence waiting for court. The young man 2 rows back, the one who'd been filming quietly, caught her eye. He mouthed, "I got you." She shook her head. "Not yet." The intercom cracked. "Cabin crew, prepare for departure." Naomi exhaled slowly. They were about to take off with a lie strapped into 2A. Then a voice, nervous, uncertain, from behind the beverage cart. Captain? Sorry, but something's not adding up." A junior flight attendant, badge reading Elena, stepped into the aisle. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes didn't. She pointed at her tablet. "The manifest, it's missing a data link. I saw it flash Horizon Executive Profile before it vanished." Cheryl's tone sharpened. "You must have misread it." "I didn't," Elena replied. "Someone manually overwrote it." Mr. Walker scoffed. "Oh, come on. You really think she's some kind of executive?" Naomi turned her head, finally meeting his gaze. "Funny thing," she said softly. "People like you only believe in hierarchy when you're on top." Cheryl stepped closer. "Ma'am, please lower your voice." Naomi smiled. "You've mistaken calm for compliance." The cabin went silent again, that eerie quiet before thunder. Then came the knock. The pilot's door opened. "Everything okay?" he asked. Cheryl spoke fast. "Minor passenger issue, resolved soon." Elena shook her head. "It's not resolved. The system log just flagged an internal error tied to corporate access." The pilot frowned. "Corporate what?" "Is little day in order. Is a radon NBNUB." Naomi finally tapped her phone screen, one click. On the other end, Rachel answered immediately. "Ma'am?" "Rachel," Naomi said, voice steady. "Confirm identity verification for passenger 2A. Rachel's tone was crisp, controlled. "Confirm, Dr. Ellis. I've relinked your profile. Would you like me to initiate compliance protocol?" Cheryl's face drained of color. "Wait, Dr. Ellis?" The pilot blinked, lost. "What's happening?" Naomi's eyes met his. "Exactly what you were warned about in training." She slid the folded boarding pass onto the tray table. "A systems test. And you failed before takeoff. The engine suddenly powered down a mechanical groan, followed by silence. A voice came over the intercom, automated but undeniable. Attention crew. Horizon executive override activated. Flight 77 is on hold, pending internal investigation. Gasps. Whispers. Phones lifted. Mr. Walker's face went pale. You did this? Naomi turned toward the window, the sunlight painting her calm profile in gold. No, she said quietly. You did. And outside, on the tarmac, the plane that was supposed to rise didn't move an inch. For 30 seconds, no one spoke. The engines wound down into an unnatural hush, leaving only the faint buzz of overhead vents and the soft tapping of nervous fingers against armrests. Then came the first whisper. What does she mean, executive override? Wait, is she serious? Someone in row 5 muttered. She just froze the flight. Naomi didn't turn. She sat like a statue carved from calm and consequence. The pilot's radio crackled. Flight 77, this is operations. We're holding you pending clearance from Horizon Corporate. Stand by. He blinked twice, disoriented. Corporate? That's impossible. We haven't even... The voice cut in again. Repeat. Stand by. Executive level lockout is in effect. Gasps rippled across the cabin. Cheryl, the senior attendant, clutched her tablet, its screen now blank. The flight's entire digital system had gone dark, replaced by a single glowing message. System hold. Authorized by Dr. Naomi Ellis. Elena stepped back, stunned. That's her name. Naomi finally rose from her seat. The yellow suit seemed to absorb the cabin light, commanding silence. She turned to the pilot, her tone even but unmistakable. You asked me to stand up, so here I am. The captain swallowed hard. Dr. Ellis, we had no idea. That's the point, she said. You weren't supposed to know who I was. You were supposed to know how to treat people. Her words landed like quiet thunder. Mr. Walker leaned forward, face pale but pride clinging like a dying flame. You can't just stop a plane because of some misunderstanding. Naomi looked at him, not angry, almost pitying. A misunderstanding is forgetting someone's name. What you did was theft. You took my seat and my dignity, and you expected applause. From the rear cabin, someone started clapping a slow, uncertain rhythm that grew louder. A woman's voice said, Finally, someone's saying it, Cheryl hissed. Everyone stay seated. Naomi ignored her. She pulled her phone again, pressed the speaker button. Rachel, she said, update the cabin. A clear, composed voice filled the air. This is Rachel Thomas, Executive Operations for Horizon Group. Flight 77 is temporarily grounded under protocol review. Dr. Naomi Ellis, our CEO, is on board. All staff are to remain in compliance. Eyes widened across the rows. Passengers whispered, stunned. CEO? One man said. She owns the airline? Another whispered. Cheryl's hands trembled as she straightened her uniform. Dr. Ellis, we didn't know. Naomi's voice stayed measured. That's the tragedy of it. You don't need to know who someone is to show them respect. Elena stood behind her now, small but steady. She told you the truth, Elena said to Cheryl and the captain. You just didn't want to believe it. The captain took a step back, running a hand over his face. Ma'am, what happens now? Naomi looked around the cabin at the faces watching, at the tension hanging like static. What happens now, she said, is the same thing that happens every time bias boards a flight. Everything stops until accountability takes off. Her phone buzzed again. Rachel's voice returned. Ma'am, compliance has flagged the flight team for review. The board requests your confirmation to proceed. Naomi's answer was calm. Final. Proceed. The overhead lights dimmed, then flickered to blue corporate verification mode. Across the aisle, Mr. Walker buried his face in his hands. This can't be happening. Naomi turned, voice low but firm. It already did. And it's still happening everywhere. People think power only looks one way. Silence fell again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was awareness. Outside, the sun dipped behind the terminal glass, and the reflection on Naomi's yellow suit shimmered like dawn breaking through storm clouds. The flight wasn't going anywhere, but justice had just taken off. The engines had gone quiet, but the cabin had never been louder, not in sound, but in pulse. People weren't speaking. They were thinking. You could feel it in the air, the reckoning, the shame, the awe. Dr. Naomi Ellis stood near row 2, a steady and deliberate. Her posture said everything her voice didn't. Calm was her rebellion. The captain whispered something into his headset, face pale. Cheryl, the senior attendant, hovered near the galley, eyes glassy, as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. Mr. Walker, the man who had claimed her seat, sat frozen, lips pressed tight. The earlier arrogance was gone. What remained was disbelief, wrapped in guilt. Elena, the junior attendant, finally broke the silence. Dr. Ellis, she said softly, I'm sorry. I should have spoken sooner. Naomi turned toward her. You just did. That's what matters. A few passengers nodded faintly. The young man filming earlier whispered, Keep going. They need to hear this. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She walked slowly toward the front of the cabin, her heels clicking against the floor, the only sound cutting through the pressure. Every seat on this plane, she began, was designed for safety, comfort, and equality. Yet somehow the air feels heavier when I sit in one. Her eyes swept across the rows. Why is that? No one answered. The captain lowered his gaze. Cheryl looked away. A mother holding her child in row 5 murmured, Because people assume what they see. Naomi nodded gently. Exactly. And that's the problem. You assume the world looks like you until it doesn't. Mr. Walker's voice cracked through the hush. Look, I made a mistake, all right? I didn't know. They all 7 in separate is true. Naomi met his eyes. That's the second tragedy you didn't want to know. You just wanted to be right. The words landed like a verdict. Rachel's voice came through Naomi's phone again, crisp and quiet. Dr. Ellis, the board has confirmed the grounding. All crew will be debriefed upon arrival at terminal. Operations requests your final note for record. Naomi exhaled. Tell them this isn't about punishment, it's about pattern. Rachel paused. Pattern, ma'am? Yes, Naomi said, steady. Every incident begins the same way, disbelief dressed as procedure. It ends with apology, but rarely with change. Let this one end differently. Cheryl took a hesitant step forward. Dr. Ellis, please. I've worked here 12 years. This isn't who we are. Naomi's reply was soft, almost merciful. Then prove it when I'm not on board. From somewhere behind, a voice called out, a man in his 60s, gray hair, calm eyes. You handled this with grace, ma'am. I'd have lost my temper long ago. Naomi smiled faintly. Anger burns fast. Dignity lasts longer. The passengers began to shift, some nodding, some silent, all watching her as if history had just stood up in front of them. Elena held the cabin phone, voice trembling but clear. Corporate control, this is Flight 77. We are standing by for further instruction. The reply came, understood. Remain on hold. It grade after grade pun. Naomi returned to her seat, but this time no one dared to speak. She glanced out the window, the runway stretching into gold. Planes taking off one by one, leaving them behind. She whispered, mostly to herself. Funny. We call it taking off, but sometimes staying grounded is where real elevation begins. The line hung in the air like scripture, and as she closed her eyes, the hum of distant jet engines faded into something quieter. Not silence, but reflection. For the first time that morning, the world outside was still, because it finally had something worth stopping for. 27 minutes had passed since the first shout, and yet, no one had moved. Not the captain, not the attendants, not the man who'd torn her boarding pass in half. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. From the window beside her seat, Naomi watched as 2 ground vehicles approached the plane, white vans marked with the Horizon Air emblem and the blue seal of corporate compliance. Phones rose across the cabin. Everyone knew something extraordinary was unfolding, but no one quite knew how to behave around it. The intercom cracked. Attention crew. Maintain current position. Compliance officers boarding for verification. Cheryl's voice wavered. Dr. Ellis, I didn't mean... Naomi looked at her calmly. You didn't mean to get caught. That's different. Next, with a ways to the coming down. Elena stood quietly near the galley, holding her tablet. When the door opened, the rush of outside air sliced through the tense silence. 2 officials stepped aboard in navy suits, tablets in hand, faces composed and clinical. Dr. Ellis, one said, we've confirmed your authorization. May we proceed? She nodded. They turned to the captain. Captain Daniel Pierce? He stood rigid. Yes, sir, the officer continued. You and your senior flight attendant are temporarily relieved of duty pending review. Please hand over your access IDs. Cheryl's voice cracked. But the flight isn't even airborne. That's precisely the point, the officer replied, taking her badge. Gasps fluttered through the rows. Mr. Walker looked like he'd aged 10 years in half an hour. You're firing them here? Naomi finally turned to him. Not firing, grounding. When a system fails in midair, you land it before it hurts anyone else. The words hit like a sermon. Elena blinked hard, holding back tears not from fear, but from recognition. The compliance officers moved methodically, logging statements, scanning devices. Each tap of the tablet sounded like justice being typed in real time. Meanwhile, Naomi stayed in her seat, phone resting in her palm. She wasn't smiling. There was no triumph, only quiet resolve. Her assistant's voice came through the earpiece. Ma'am, internal feed shows passenger recordings going viral. Hashtag number flight 77, truth is trending. Naomi sighed softly. That's not the story I wanted told. What story do you want, ma'am? The one where this never happens again. From the aisle, Mr. Walker suddenly spoke. His voice trembled softer now. I was wrong, he said. All of it. The words, the assumption. I'm sorry. Naomi looked at him, unflinching. I don't need your apology, she said. I need your awareness. You'll sit in that truth longer than this flight ever would have lasted. He nodded, tears threatening but not falling. Elena, still watching, whispered, You just changed this airline. Naomi's eyes softened. No. I reminded it who owns the sky. One of the officers returned. Dr. Ellis, ground control awaits your directive, cancel or reschedule. Naomi stood slowly, her yellow suit glowing under the cabin lights. Reschedule, she said. After the training manuals are rewritten. Passengers applauded quietly, hesitant at first, then certain. The sound built, row by row, until even the engines seemed to echo it. Cheryl and the captain stepped off the plane in silence. Badges surrendered. Outside, the tarmac shimmered in afternoon heat. Naomi turned to the cabin one last time. No one flies higher by stepping on someone else's wings. Then she sat down again, not as a passenger, but as the gravity that had just taught a lesson in altitude. And for the first time since that cruel sentence, get up or get out, every soul on board finally understood what belonging looked like. The door closed behind the dismissed crew with a final metallic thud. It didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like closure. For a moment, the plane was a cathedral. No noise, no motion, just the echo of consequence settling into the air. The late sunlight spilled through the oval windows, soft gold against the quiet faces of strangers who had just witnessed something bigger than a delay. Dr. Naomi Ellis stood in the aisle, looking neither proud nor angry, only steady. The yellow of her suit caught the glow like truth catching light. From the cockpit, the new standby captain stepped out, a woman in her 40s, dark-skinned, calm, wearing the stripes of command with humility. Dr. Ellis, she said carefully, I've been instructed to assume control of this flight. I just wanted to say, I saw the footage. Naomi nodded. Then you know what not to repeat. Yes, ma'am. The captain glanced around the cabin, then back at her. Permission to proceed when you're ready. Naomi took a breath, then shook her head gently. Not yet. A murmur rippled through the passengers. One whispered, Is she still stopping the flight? Naomi turned toward them, voice clear, resonant but not loud. This pause, this inconvenience isn't punishment. It's reflection. We can't rush forward pretending the air is clean until we face what's been floating in it. Her words were heavy, but they landed softly. A few passengers nodded, some lowered their eyes. Others looked at her with something new, respect, not born from her title, but from her tone. Elena, the young attendant, approached cautiously. Dr. Ellis, corporate asked if you want to record a statement before we resume. Naomi considered, then smiled faintly. No press, no statement, just people remembering how this felt. Elena nodded and stepped back. Mr. Walker still sat in his seat, face pale, eyes red. He hadn't moved since apologizing. When Naomi approached, he stood instinctively. You don't have to stand, she said. I should have stood earlier, he murmured. The humility in his voice surprised even himself. Naomi met his gaze. Then learn from it. Awareness is only useful when it leads to action. He swallowed hard. I will. Naomi looked past him toward the window, the city below glowing like forgiveness trying to rise. She turned back to the passengers. Everyone here, she said, just became a witness to a system correcting itself. That's not something to hide from. That's something to carry. A woman across the aisle, the mother with the child, spoke up. Ma'am, thank you. My daughter will remember this. Naomi's lips softened into the smallest smile. Then it was worth grounding the plane. The new captain called from the front. Ma'am, clearance is ready when you are. Naomi nodded once. Let's fly. The engines roared back to life, slow at first, then steady, not the noise of power, but the hum of restoration. As the plane began to taxi, Naomi took her seat again in 2A. Elena came by quietly, offering a drink. Champagne, Dr. Ellis? Naomi shook her head. Just water. I prefer clarity. Laughter, soft and genuine, rippled through the nearby rows. The tension had dissolved, leaving something pure gratitude. Out the window, the runway stretched wide open, the way forward gleaming in sunset. Naomi whispered under her breath, barely audible. This is what takeoff should feel like when truth finally has clearance. The wheels began to roll, and for the first time that day, everyone on board felt the lift not from altitude, but from awakening. The engines roared softly beneath them. That steady vibration you feel more than hear, the kind that hums in your chest when something broken starts to move again. The plane began taxiing toward the runway, but the cabin wasn't just ready for takeoff, it was ready for reflection. Naomi Ellis sat back in her seat, hands folded lightly over her lap. Across the aisle, passengers watched her in quiet admiration, the same woman they had judged, dismissed, or ignored just an hour before. Now she was gravity itself, commanding stillness through calm. Elena knelt slightly beside her. Dr. Ellis, we'll be airborne in 6 minutes. Horizon Control wants to know if you'd like to make an internal note for staff training. Naomi turned her head. Record this. Elena tapped her tablet, eyes steady. Naomi's voice carried through the hush of the cabin, low, precise, deliberate. When bias becomes routine, professionalism becomes its disguise. That's how it hides in procedure, in tone, in silence. But silence never absolves anyone, it just prolongs the lie. Her words hung there, weightless but undeniable. In row 3, a man nodded slowly. In row 5, a woman whispered, That needs to be printed on every training manual, Naomi continued. People think injustice shouts. It doesn't. It whispers politely, efficiently, in the language of protocol, and we mistake it for order. Elena stopped typing for a moment, just listening. Then Naomi added softly, Today order was grounded so humanity could take off. The young attendant blinked fast, swallowed hard, then whispered, Recorded. Naomi leaned back, eyes closing briefly. From the intercom, the new captain's voice was calm, certain. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for departure. Thank you for your patience and for witnessing accountability in real time. A small wave of applause rippled through the cabin. It wasn't loud. It was honest. As the plane rolled forward, Naomi glanced out the window again. The sky ahead looked different now, not empty, but cleansed. She thought of her mother's words decades ago. One day they'll try to seat you lower. Sit anyway. That memory played like a film reel behind her eyes, 16 years old, waiting at an airport gate where no one called her name though she'd checked in first. A woman had walked past her to the counter, and the attendant had smiled, saying, You must be Miss Ellis. She hadn't corrected them. Not then. She'd learned silence can sometimes be armor, but today silence was her sword. The nose of the aircraft lifted from the runway. The moment the wheels left the ground, something invisible shifted inside everyone aboard. Naomi looked out into the fading light and thought, This is what rising above looks like. Across the aisle, Mr. Walker sat staring at his folded hands. He hadn't spoken since his apology. His reflection in the window trembled slightly as clouds drifted past. Then, almost under his breath, he said, I'll never forget this flight. Naomi heard him. Good, she said quietly. It was meant to be remembered. Elena passed by, gently placing a folded napkin on Naomi's armrest. Written in neat script, Thank you for showing me who I want to be when I wear this uniform. Naomi smiled. Then you already are. Outside, the clouds parted like curtains, revealing sunlight, warm, forgiving, endless. As the plane ascended, Naomi whispered to herself. We're all still learning how to fly without stepping on someone else's wings. And at 30,000 feet, for the first time that day, the air truly felt clean. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin had found a rhythm again. Quiet, reflective, reverent. No one scrolled. No one sighed impatiently. Phones that had once recorded shame now rested face down on tray tables, as if even the screens needed to think about what they'd seen. Dr. Naomi Ellis sat by the window, watching the sunset spill molten gold across the clouds. Every few seconds, lightning flickered far in the distance, silent and harmless now, just weather reminding her how storms end. Elena approached softly, careful not to break the moment. Dr. Ellis, Horizon HQ, has confirmed the compliance report is filed. They also asked if you'd like to address the public statement directly or through PR. Naomi smiled faintly. Through action, not words. Elena blinked. Ma'am? Fix the structure, not the story. The world's full of apologies that never changed anything. Elena nodded slowly. Understood. From across the aisle, the mother and daughter watched in quiet fascination. The little girl leaned toward her mom. Is she a superhero? It is Sevens, her mother chuckled softly. Something better, she's real. Mr. Walker sat 2 rows back, still silent, a man dissecting his own reflection in the plastic window. His hands were clasped tight, not in guilt anymore, but in awakening. Finally, he stood and walked down the aisle toward her. Dr. Ellis, he said, voice low. May I speak? Naomi turned, expression unreadable but open. You already are. He hesitated. I used to think I was one of the good ones. Polite, educated, never raised a hand or said the wrong word. But today I saw how quiet harm works, how easy it is to steal dignity and call it policy. Naomi studied him, not judging, simply measuring the honesty in his tone. Awareness, she said, isn't redemption. It's the runway. What you do next decides if you ever take off. He nodded. Then I'll start by teaching my sons what this looks like. Naomi's gaze softened. Good. Teach them altitude begins in the ground and how you treat people before they rise. The cabin was silent again, but not heavy this time. It felt awake. From the cockpit, the captain's voice came over the intercom, warm and clear. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now cruising at 35,000 feet. The air ahead is smooth. On behalf of Horizon Air, we'd like to thank Dr. Ellis for reminding us what real flight means. A soft wave of applause broke out, genuine, subdued, reverent. Naomi didn't bask in it. She just nodded once, quietly humbled. She turned to the window again. The world below looked small, runways like veins, clouds like continents of light. It reminded her how power works best when it's distant enough to see everything, but close enough to care. Elena appeared again with a small silver envelope. Corporate sent this up, ma'am. They said you'd want to see it. Naomi opened it, a printed message with a single line. Grounded flights can still change skies. Horizon board. She smiled. At least someone was listening. As twilight deepened, Naomi rested her head against the window, whispering to herself, elevation isn't about height, it's about humanity. Behind her, a passenger quietly prayed. Another wiped a tear. And somewhere between heaven and earth, in a plane that had once been frozen by prejudice, the hum of the engines now sounded like healing, steady, alive, and finally free of turbulence. The seatbelt light blinked on, and a gentle voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent into New York. Estimated landing, 20 minutes. Naomi opened her eyes. The clouds outside had thinned into ribbons of fire, the last streaks of sunset bleeding into night. She could see the city far below, small, flickering, unaware that a quiet revolution had just happened above it. Across the aisle, passengers were no longer strangers. A few smiled at her, a silent thank you passing between them. The little girl waved shyly. Bye, superhero. Naomi smiled. Be better than one. Elena came down the aisle with the grace of someone forever changed. Dr. Ellis, she said softly. Corporate requested post-landing debrief at gate. But I think the lesson's already landed. Naomi nodded. Then let's make sure it stays. The engine softened to a hum as the plane cut through the last layer of clouds. Lights of Manhattan glittered beneath them, billions of stories, each unaware that dignity had just taken flight in seat 2A. Naomi exhaled slowly. She wasn't thinking about punishment or headlines or power. Only one simple truth. Respect is air. Everyone deserves to breathe it. As the wheels prepared to meet the ground, she whispered to herself, to the world below, to anyone still learning. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lands quietly. The tires kiss the runway with a soft, decisive thud, the kind that says, "We've arrived, not we've ended." Applause rippled through the cabin, gentle but real. Naomi looked out at the runway lights, flickering past like Morse code from the earth itself, each one spelling the same word, seen. Elena's voice came through the intercom, calm and proud. "Welcome to New York, everyone. Thank you for your patience and for flying with Horizon." Mr. Walker stood as the plane slowed, pausing by Naomi's seat. "I hope someday I earn a chance to fly under you again," he said quietly. Naomi gave a small nod. "Then start walking different on the ground." Outside, dawn pressed against the horizon, pale and new. The plane taxied toward the gate, not just carrying passengers, but carrying proof that quiet strength could reroute even the sky. Naomi reached for her coat, smoothing the yellow fabric one last time. "Next flight," she murmured. "They'll remember how to look at a black woman in first class and see a CEO, not a seat to steal." In every work, their room and any take in it, the cabin doors opened to the cool breath of morning. Passengers stepped out slower than usual, not from fatigue, but reverence. Each one glanced back at 2A, as if leaving behind the echo of something sacred. Naomi stood, straightened her jacket, and paused in the aisle. Elena waited near the exit, eyes shining. "Dr. Ellis," she whispered. "The world will talk about this flight." Naomi smiled softly. "Then let them talk. We didn't stage a spectacle, we staged a standard." Outside, cameras flickered beyond the glass, news already spreading. She didn't pose, didn't wave, just walked into the light with quiet grace, her heels striking the terminal floor like punctuation to a sentence the world needed to hear. A journalist shouted, "Dr. Ellis, any final comment?" Naomi turned, voice calm but resonant. "I didn't record justice today," she said. "I enforced it." She kept walking. Behind her, Flight 77 sat motionless on the tarmac, grounded, gleaming, transformed. And over that still aircraft, the morning sun rose high, golden and new proof that sometimes the sky itself waits for dignity to board.